I've asked Sandya Lang to join. She's the Chief of Sustainability at Nudie Jeans in Sweden, and she's extremely kindly offered to run through what Nudie Jeans are doing in terms of initiatives to work towards living wage for their workers in their supply chain. So thank you so very much for joining me. I know that you haven't been well, so I'm delighted and really, really pleased that you've carved time out for us. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. And apologize for my voice. I've been, yeah, it's not at the best. Anyway, I thought I'm gonna give you like a background sort of first. Yeah, this is like what we call the world of Nudien. So we have, yeah, repair shops globally. It's our own shops basically where we also do the repairs. We have some repair partners that is retailers that are doing the repairs as well. So the consumer side of things is very big part of Nudie Jeans, but also what we do in terms of actions in the supply chain. And you can also see here where we have the production. And in yeah, with the topic of living wages, we started off in India actually. And this was back in 2012. And we were having quite of a new collaboration with a supplier called Armstrong Knitting Mills, which was quite of a huge supplier for
Oh,
us.
I know them.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
they're very interesting. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, we started off in conversation. I think the conversation started already in like end of 2011 or something with the concept of living wages and see if we understood each other and so on. But the actual first program was made in 2012, where we were asked by Amnesty International in Sweden to produce some garments for them. And obviously they wanted to have like, yeah, very good conditions and the workers should be paid well and so on. So we started off with that. And we're also part of the Fair Foundation organization. So in that
Is that
membership,
the Fair Wear Foundation?
yeah, exactly, yeah. So in that in those criteria, the code of labor practice, they were the only one at the time, and I think still is actually that have pointed out like payment of a living wage instead of a minimum wage or fair wage or whatever other organization is calling it. So living wage was on the agenda already by the membership, you can say. But this was
And
the
that
first.
was already back in 2012, did you say?
Yeah, actually, yeah, the program we started was in 2012, but we became members in Fairwear 2009. So it
Right.
was, yeah, even before that. And then yeah, we started to, we were also part of FLO study. So the discussion around the Fairwear, or sorry, the fair trade standards came about, I think, at the same time. So we were a case company in that sense, and Armstrong was a case supplier for that study. So it was actually the Fair Trade program that was planning to expand their program from farmers to also incorporate stages in the supply chain, like manufacturing.
And
Um,
can I just ask Sandra? So this is the Fair Labor Organization. This the Fair Trade Foundation, or is this the American
no, it's the Fair Trade International, I think it's called, right?
Fair Trade
Yeah.
International? Okay, and so they were extending beyond farmer livelihoods into the manufacture stages.
Yeah, exactly. That started already then. I think the discussion. I think it's been quite of a long journey for them as well to get the standard in place and having yeah, companies and brands on board that journey. Yeah. So, but basically in that study, that was like the first seed, so to say, of us calculating the how to do the calculation, what should be added, and so on. So that was. Helping us a little bit, I would say, in getting things going at the very start. And decision making, I think many other brands are like interested in that. Maybe like how do you actually take the decision to do such a program or yeah, initiative. And I think maybe it's a little bit different for Nudegins because we are a private company, quite small one. At the time, we had three owners. They were all very much like aligned and into sustainability. So when I come with a proposal of like, okay, let's add this amount to be able to pay our share, because that is important to say. We pay only our share based on the volumes that we have at this supplier.
And
Yeah.
how did you calculate your share? So, for example, if I don't know the workforce is 10,000, but maybe if you look at your production all year round,
Mm.
beauty
At the
production,
time, yeah, at the
yeah.
time we only had like maybe 3 or 5% of the total production, so it wasn't much. But we decided to give everyone actually in the factory. The factory had like 1,500 employees approximately, but we decided to give everyone a very small share then from our contribution, rather than to single select some employees working more frequently with our products. Because in a big settings like that, there's many production lines, people come and go. It's quite difficult to know exactly who was working on what, basically. So we thought it would be maybe not the most fair way to do it, but still one way to do it, to divide it equally among all the employees. But going back to the decision making, it was actually it wasn't that hard for me to get this true at the point, because it was this factory is making t-shirts. It's a smaller product group for us, so it doesn't really had a very big impact on the financials at the time. So in that sense, it was a very easy decision. Took only like, I don't know, a few minutes, I guess, to convince them, and then we just said, let's do it. So we didn't have any experience whatsoever. We've been to tons of seminars on how to calculate, what to do, all this stuff, but we didn't hear anyone actually talking about how they actually practically were doing it. So we thought that, okay, let's try out. Maybe it's not perfect. We knew it wasn't perfect, but we knew that we together with the supplier also had a very good collaboration, and we said that let's start here and work together and see where we need to improve along the way, basically. So we didn't have to convince the supplier that much either. They were quite open for the project. They had other clients, of course, that were not so interested in this program.
At that time, did any of their other clients join you in contributing in the same
yeah.
way?
Yeah, it was a few others actually that joined quite immediately, and that was really great to see, because together we were, I said like we had like maybe 3 to 5%, but they had something else, and then we ended up in maybe 15% or something like that at the most.
That's
So,
really
yeah.
impressive. And you often hear, buyers and heads of sustainability saying, well, we don't have enough leverage, so we can't do
Mm,
anything. So it really inspiring.
yeah, but that has
How did you reach out to other buyers to say, look, we're
well.
doing a thing, would you be interested in joining us?
Well, the thing is that I think that has been Nudigen's approach from the very start, that we don't really have the ownership of this program. It's the factory that has the ownership, the supplier. And the reason for that I wanted to be like that as well, is that we are not in the position to convince other brands, basically. We can give inspiration, we can give details about how we did it, but the factory are the ones that are actually doing the calculation, they're doing the distribution, they are the ones having the client relationship with other brands. So they need to have the ownership. I think that is the only way in the long run as well, for it to be sustainable. I mean, now we do not have as much production any longer at this factory, so for different reasons. But then it's also illustrate the reality a little bit. Like if we were the ones holding the program totally, then they will not be able to recruit any new brands coming into the program. But since they have the ownership of the program, it's also a shared responsibility, of course, to attract more interesting brands, maybe. But a big part lies also on them to do that.
Congratulations. That's super interesting. And I like the approach a lot. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, and that is the factory owned responsibility, I think, has been the key theme for us
Mhm.
along the way. So when we were like starting very much from the beginning here, but when we were actually looking at what level should it be and so on, we were at the time looking at Asian floor wage, for example. I think it was a little bit early for the anchor benchmark at the time. But we also realized the Tirupur was a bit different from the bigger cities in India. So we asked the factory to do a local survey among their employees to set a local benchmark. And that was also good, not only because we got a local, living wage benchmark exactly for those workers, but also to create some kind of engagement, both with the factory, they feeling the ownership and so on, and also the worker engagement in this. So that was also one of the, because also we're sitting in Gothenburg in Sweden, we cannot really go out in the factory asking those kind of questions in the local language and so on. So obviously we need someone else to do this for us.
So the page with the handwriting in, I guess, Tamil underneath it. So what is this breaking down then? How much you're
Yeah,
spending on rent and food and medical,
exactly.
etc.
Yeah. So this is in the local language, but it's more like they had to give an estimation on what would be the living wage for them, covering like transport, housing, school fees, etc., and also savings then, because that is what's included in a living wage. And then they ended up at one sum, for example, and then this was aggregated together with all the rest of the, I don't know, 300 services or something that they did to get
And
a,
this and this,
yeah.
I beg your pardon. So this is dated. Did you say 2012?
Yeah, this must be from around that time, yeah, 12, 13, something like that, yeah.
Okay, okay. And just so that we have a bit of a sense. So what would the annual inflation be in India, do you think?
Well, we don't know really the annual inflation like that, but this survey is done like regularly, like once a year, once every 1.5 years or something like that. So we
Oh,
try
so
to keep up
Armstrong do
with,
it
yeah,
regularly.
exactly, yeah.
Hmm. Amazing.
Yeah, and then of course the verification part is very important because the most common question that I get, or was at least in the very beginning, was that like, but how can you be sure that the money is received by the workers and so on? A fair question, obviously, but since this collaboration was built on, I would say, very much trust, and from the beginning, we didn't ever have that kind of would say fear. But obviously we did have audits for controlling this. We also work with transparent invoices where the amount is listed in the invoices. We had the research team from the University of Gothenburg. We also were
Wait,
there at the
when
time.
you say transparent invoices, do you
Mhm.
mean
Well, you
where
can
the
see a
FOB price
small
being?
example here, actually, where the living wage column is at the at the end there. So then it's different for different styles, basically, and what is added on is specified there as well. So that was one way of having that transparent from the factory side to us, and then also we could check that, or the audit team could check that it was matching the payments that was delivered to the workforce.
That's interesting. So sorry, just to break that down. So, um, presumably each style would have an open costing sheet with
Yeah,
the
exactly.
materials
Mm.
and the different accessories, and then the different elements of labor at different stages of the production. But then, in addition to that, there's a summary sheet which is by style that is then
Yeah.
lifting the living wage of all of those different workers that have worked on that product, that can then be analyzed and set against their monthly payroll uh, documentation. Is
Yeah,
that?
kind of. It's more like I mean, obviously, in the very beginning, we didn't have like a full open costing sheet from the factory, but they did the calculation based on the processes. So, for example, if you have a t-shirt or a hoodie or something, it's different processes. And if you add a print, of course, it's a one more process. So they made a calculation based on each style, basically. So that is what you see here in the like a little bit of that, at least, that it varies between the different styles, basically.
Yes, yes.
But later on now, I will come to that a bit later, but then we started to work with open costing, actually, that was is now provided by the Fair Price app. So that is another way of doing that. But from the very beginning, we relied heavily on the factory to do that calculation for us. And we just assumed that that would be like we didn't question that too much, like if it was like 125 or 128 cents, for example. We said like, okay, it's your responsibility to do the calculation in a good way.
Did I
Um,
hear you say something like the Fair app or Fair
yeah,
Way? Can you?
Yeah, I will maybe come to that later, but
Okay, sure.
a quick note on that is that it's actually like an application where you can enter data, the factory enters data. It's like yeah, you get a full transparency of the material, the trims, etc., and also the labor minutes and so on. So you can actually calculate the difference between if you would have paid a living wage or if you would have paid a like regular price for the product. So that is a way to make it a little bit easier for the product development and buyers when they look at the price point and yeah, and for us to work together on just taking the decision basically on where we should add this living wage, which
And
product.
so key because as buyers go back negotiating prices, obviously the price has to come from somewhere. It's not just the factory overhead, is it? So it's
Mm.
a really interesting dichotomy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that was like I mean that was a discussion that we had very early on. Um, I know that many other brands are struggling like to find where should that where should we get the money basically to pay out this. But for Nudie Jeans, it has been we are in a like in a I don't know mid premium segment, so we are not that price sensitive as such. And we did have yeah, the possibility to take from our own margins basically to incorporate this living wage amounts. And I understand that's not for everyone, but for us it has worked. And maybe it has worked because it's also been one of the product groups that we were that wasn't yeah biggest for us basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we expanded the program a little bit. We started off in this yeah, with Armstrong factory. They have 2 units for stitching, but we also expanded it to different tiers because they are a vertical factory. So also with the spinning, knitting, and fabric dyeing. Um, and we're trying to, yeah, expanding it to other countries as well. Back in 2018, we're trying to set goals, but we also had a very long discussion on like, okay, what is realistic and what is really possible, because we also understand that what we've learned in the first few years was that each and every unit basically needed to have some very local approach. The local benchmark, the local management, the workforce, etc. So every place is different, you could say. So it's not like you're gonna have one type of program and then you're gonna be able to roll out that from to all the suppliers. At least that has not been our experience. So that is yeah, that is a challenge, and that is also why we question a little bit to have this kind of, you know, big goals where you said like in this and this year everyone is going to have a living wage, because we know it's not going to be realistic basically. But of course we can do what we can to move towards that direction. We did so we did have a goal actually, and it's also stated in our yeah sustainability report. This is yeah this is what we are doing now. And mapping our wage levels, that is something that we did also for so many years now, but it's also been a little bit easier with the Fair Price app, because then you can actually see that very clearly, basically, if that's needed or not. We were also in this living wage incubator by 17 and 19, run by Fairwear, and that was also a very good group of brands that we learned from, and we were learning how to use this labor minute costing tool, and also hearing the other brands' experiences. I think they still continue with this program in some way. We are not part of this any longer, but I think it's for other brands that has been yeah, maybe starting with a few projects and wanted to get more inspiration for moving forward and so on.
So, sorry, if I could just jump back. So, if we go to
Yeah.
slide 9, have you? So here, you know, you've taken this highly localized approach, which
Mm,
makes
yeah.
total sense in terms of understanding the benchmark of costs of living and local management, etc., etc. However, Nudie has set a sub goal, which is wage levels at 100% of your main suppliers and their employees' need for a living wage by 2022. And has that been achieved?
Yeah, mapping the wage level is complete, but the second one there, no, we're not there,
Yeah,
and we're not going to be there by 2025 either. I think we
yeah.
have
So that's
yeah.
implementing a share living wage payment to reach 100% of employees at all the main suppliers in high risk countries. So when we say main suppliers, like how much, what percentage of the product that you're currently producing would be considered supplied by the main suppliers?
Yeah, well, actually, it's a lot because in Tunisia we have our denim supplier, one of the two denim suppliers. Um, so yeah, that would be a lot actually. So, but in Turkey and India, the product groups are still quite small. So I would say maybe this would count at maybe 70%, something like that, 70, 80% or something like that. So
Okay,
it's
it's
significantly,
it's
yeah,
it's it's huge, isn't it? So
yeah.
the 70% you'd hope to achieve by 2025, but that will take a bit more time. What would you estimate now? I mean, with
That's really difficult to say because it's also what we learned from when we had the program in India. It was fairly easy in one way to transfer it to other Indian suppliers. When we moved to Turkey and had the program there, that was a totally different setting. There we are four brands or four or five brands, I think now. So that's collaborating on this. So that is great in many ways because then of course the amount that the employees are getting is really high. So very close to a actually living wage for all employees there. But in Turkey, we have a different situation there, and the factories has a very strong have two strong unions. The unions are not really they are not maybe the easiest way to go because then they also put pressure on the factory. So the factory management is quite hesitant to actually let us pay something, even though we want to do something, let's say. But they are quite hesitant as well because they also are quite afraid of what the consequences would be if we were to pay and the other clients are not, for example. That will cause a lot of internal disturbance affecting the production and so on. So it's not as easy as you just want to pay something and then it's received well. You also need to take into those other considerations as well. And that make me think that it's not going to be 2025, it's not going to be 2026 either. So I cannot really estimate actually if or when we will be able to succeed with this. So it's of course it's a disappointment, but it's also the reality.
And these realities are super important, aren't they? Sometimes I hear from brands that if they want to put the wage up for their orders, you know, even if they're 70-80% of the production total,
Mm.
that can create a disturbance externally. So
Mm.
yes, I
Yeah,
mean,
you have to take consideration into a lot of things, not only, of course, the factory, but also if there are strong unions, for example, they need to have a say in this as well, and the local communities and maybe affecting other factories in the area, if that would be like setting a norm, so to say. And I think the reason why we Nudie Jeans started off doing this in the first place was the fact that we understand, of course, that the best thing would be if it would be negotiated, by the collective bargaining agreements and so on. But in countries like India, it will take very long time before that happens, actually. So we thought that we cannot just, wait for that to happen, and we don't really have the influence to influence those parties involved in that process. So we thought that at least we can do what we can for our products. And that is, yeah.
So why in India does it take so long for the unions to look at this as the collective bargaining? Because I hear that this year, every 4 years, I think in Tirupur, for example, in India, there's a renegotiation, collective bargaining with the sector. And it feels like this would be exactly the kind of topic and the expertise
Mm.
you and a few other sustainability pioneers brands have, that you would bring your experience to bear. Obviously, there is also the very real commercial macro situation, which is where the orders have dropped in that area of Tirupur very, very significantly. So, one has to make sure that it doesn't choke off, other buyers because people need work. Um, but do you also, as a brand, do you personally or your team get involved with looking at some of those, working either with those labor unions, or looking at the kind of the macro economic situation for the workers in the factories?
To be honest, no, we haven't really been involved in that kind of discussions. I think it might be so that those organizations have a good impact in terms of negotiating the salary levels and so on. But I also think that, or at least that our experience from the factories that we've been working with, that the workers engaging in labor unions are really, really low. They don't I mean, all factories have like worker committees of different sorts, of course, but that is not really the same as a labor union. So it's also been a very sensitive topic, I would say, being part of a labor union. And I think that's still a long way to go for many Indian workers to have the strength and to have the possibilities to be part of that, and actually be part of that negotiations. So we haven't really felt that we are in the position to influence in that way.
Yeah, I understand. It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's also a kind of unions need to be well run. That's incredibly important. They need to have good governance too, but also, there's the big job, I feel, in socializing the role and the benefits of unions,
Mm.
in a broader context, which at the moment it feels. Anyway, sorry, I'm going off piste, but if you ever are involved in that kind of area, I'd be super interested to learn more. Sorry, I realize we're running out of time, so let's keep going. Sorry, thank
Yeah,
you.
no worries. This is more like detailed information about the different units that we were in. As you can see, it differs a little bit from numbers of workers, our share of production.
Oh,
Or
NJ is your share of production. Okay, so you
yeah, exactly.
listed all of
Yeah.
these for each
So we
supply.
are very small at all these units, and it's that is the problem, really. That we need more brands to join in on the same units that we're working with, and so far it has not been very many other Fairway members that has been part of part of our projects. We see a slight improvement of that, I think, in the last 2 years. But we are also very early on in this using this Fair Price app. We do it for a few factories.
And
Um,
so sustainably crafted clothing is the factory that you very kindly introduced me to, and I
yeah,
went to meet the team. So there is a video actually that will be ready very shortly, and will show your great work and
yeah,
partnership with
great, yeah.
their organization. Um, but to your point, so you mentioned that it's the suppliers themselves that need to
Mm,
manage and hold this process. Um, and I'm sure that the Nudie brands and your team's very passionate work also carries a lot of kudos to encourage other brands and buyers to also think about how they might become part of this living wage program and do their bit. Do you, I don't know, but do you sometimes on behalf of a supplier talk either with the supplier to another of their buyers to encourage them to join? You have this
yeah,
fantastic presentation. Is this something that you might use to encourage other buyers to do what you've done?
yeah. We have been have been presenting at different occasions for different brands in different either one by one by brand, or at different yeah, at organizations like FAIRWAY, for example, or other organizations that we've been invited to talk about this. So in that way, I think we're trying to share what we learned during these years. And even though people are not actually producing at the same factory that we are doing, maybe still it can be an inspiration for, for starting somewhere. It doesn't need to be perfect at once. That is always our ambition. I mean, to learn as we go. Because I think
It's an
otherwise
amazing job you're doing. And can I ask who owns or manages the Fair Price app?
it's developed by FAIRWAY Foundation, but I think it's now available for all to use actually. I'm
Okay,
not
so
totally sure
Fairware
about.
Foundation's Fair Price app could be used even by non-members of Fairware
I
Foundation.
think so, but maybe I need to double check that, but at least
Okay.
for the members, but I think the aim was at least for others to use it. Um, so that is something that we have been introducing now to other suppliers. Yeah, this is one of our leather suppliers in India. So that is also where we're starting. This presentation is a little bit dated from 2022. But so it's also nice to see, because this was a new unit that we didn't work with before. And as a part of the introduction, it's when we met the new supplier, this was on the table, like instantly, like, okay, this is how we work, this is how Nudie Jeans work, we have this and this kind of values, policies, etc. And in terms of the practical work, we do want to work with this topic. And they were really positive from the very start. So I think that is also one of the very great things about selecting suppliers from the start, that are sharing your values and are having the possibility to execute as well later on. Because if you choose a supplier that are not really into this from the beginning, then it might be really difficult later on to get them to change their methods or yeah.
But I suppose also what's not to like, because they've got a buyer that is being cooperative and collaborative, that is open to discussion, that is suggesting that they're going to be there for the
Mm.
long term. So, they must be delighted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in most cases there are. I mean, it's also about what type of products you have, if it's a long-lasting product, and if you're changing a lot, or if you are like fluctuating in the volumes and so on, it might be more difficult. But yeah, and then we moved on to Turkey as well. So in this factory, we have starting this program with some other brands. I think it says 3 here, but now I think it's 4 or 5 actually. So that means that new brands coming into this factory that we know of, obviously we try to influence them to join the program, because now it's an existing program there. It's very easy for them to just join and do contribute with their share basically. So that
So
is
can I just take a tiny step backwards? So in the case of the living wage program, what percentage roughly is it adding to the monthly income of a worker?
well, it depends a little bit, but what we've seen over the years, it has been on average, I would say, like 1 monthly wage per year, you can say, that has
Great.
been received. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. That's really good to know.
Yeah, so in Turkey, I would say that in one way, I would say that this project in Turkey is our most successful one, if you count like actually how much we contribute together, the 4 brands or the 5 brands now. So that is a really like a good success story in terms of also collaboration between brands, and sort of moving beyond a little bit, like competition and so on. It's this is something that we do because we all share the same kind of values, and it's still the factory running the calculation and have the responsibilities and so on. So it's not like we see the other brands' calculations in that sense. So it's not a competition in with the
And in
prices
and in the
and so
case
on.
of this particular supplier in Turkey, are they using organic fair trade cotton that is locally produced as well? So it's quite a local supply chain.
Yeah, they are using organic cotton. Fair trade is not available in Turkey as such. So they're using like Turkish materials. So that means it's organic only.
I see. And at what point might Nudie say, look, we want the fair trade certification or program. We think those benefits are important to the farmer, and in with with a view to pushing living wages, if you like, further down the supply chain.
Mm.
What would do you do that also with the organic cotton producer
Yeah,
supply?
I mean, in terms of well, we actually have a quite exciting thing going on right now. It's a parallel program both in India and in Turkey, where we are working with this regenerative organic and fair trade and cotton. But in Turkey, it's not, since fair trade is not operating in Turkey, we had to sort of get in the social aspects in some other ways. So we are doing maybe, I don't know, we are the first or not, but doing this social audits in the cotton fields in Turkey. So we have this ambition, of course, that we want to work with more, yeah, to make sure that the social aspects and especially payments are done in a good way and throughout the supply chain, even in without the fair trade program. But it's quite difficult when it's not like a set program like that. It's difficult to monitor, of course. But that would be like an ambition. I don't know if fair trade is ever going to change their criteria. It's not, including Turkey. That could be something.
Yes,
Um,
yes, it could
yeah.
be, couldn't it? And t tell me just very briefly, if you wouldn't mind, just for the sake of the listeners, about your exciting regenerative organic fair trade cotton program, if you would, just briefly.
Yeah, it's I mean, we've been working with Shetna Organics for many years in India. They are the raw material supplier for our organic fair trade cotton that we use, both for shirts and for t-shirts in India. And they've been working, you can say, with regenerative organic practices for many years, but they didn't have certification until recently. So I think with this certification program, the possibilities of also be able to sell the cotton to a higher price a little bit for
When you say they didn't have certification, you mean they didn't have regenerative
yeah,
organic?
exactly. Of
Yeah,
course, they
yeah,
had the organic and they had the
yeah,
fair trade, but they
yeah.
didn't have the regenerative organic certification.
Yeah. And that
Um,
matters to the US market. It doesn't really matter so much to the European market,
mm.
I guess. But so you're thinking that that will give it a more competitive edge in the US market?
Uh, I think from our perspective, we are not really thinking of that maybe. I think we're thinking more about like, okay, this is actually a very good practices for the farmers and for the soil and for the environment and so on. And if we have a possibility to not only do less harm, let's say using organic cotton instead of conventional cotton, regenerative is actually making a positive impact as well um, on the local environment.
So
So I think
in the
it's
case of India, that a lot of people say, well, these are the regenerative practices that are, typically in the organic farming or cotton farming process anyway. But have you found that it's a different approach with regenerative farming, and that there are extra steps or extra processes that really are quite new to the small scale
mm.
organic and fair trade farmer?
I think when I visited the farms last time, we did got to see like one of the farms working in a very like regenerative way, which means that they do have more like a holistic way of growing the cotton, you can say, using different other plants in between the cotton plants, having the cattles and so on to give fertilizing, the rain fed and also the drip irrigation process was very clear and so on. So they have this kind of methods that applies a lot to the small scale farming, I would
Yeah.
say.
You see, I don't
Um,
really understand because that's what they were doing 20 years ago, all of
yeah,
the
yeah.
processes.
But I
So it
think,
doesn't feel very new to me. But, I think it's great that it's a standard that small scale farmers can
mm,
benefit from,
mm,
especially when they're competing in the world market with these huge organic cotton
yeah.
producers in
So
Australia
I
and
mean, the practices itself, they are not new, of course. They are there since many, many, many years. But I think what is new is the, what to say, the package of having the certifications like that, and also the ability to not deviate from that. I mean, you can do regenerative, but you can also maybe complement with other things, or you can, but this certification framework sort of gives them a very clear way of farming, I guess, and also a very clear way for brands and consumers to understand that practice.
yes, 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 it's very, very exciting. It's like a gold standard. I
Mm,
am really, it's so suitable and so right that the small scale farmer should benefit from it. Sorry, I've gone
yeah,
off these. Let's get
yeah.
back.
I just jumping to this one because I think what has also been one of the like key thing is that okay, what you were asking me like okay, how much do they actually get? And the fact is that to be honest, it's not a lot since we are a small player in this quite big suppliers. But when I did some interviews with some of the employees a couple of years ago, I think it was really clear that whatever we think is a small portion is actually means a lot to them. So these are some quotes that were, some of the employees were
Amazing,
talking. Yeah.
that this could help
So
with sisters' education or
yeah, exactly. And
school
most of
debt.
these employees, they are coming from maybe other states. They are sending home money for their families and so on. And it seems to be that our contribution was something that they could actually keep for themselves. So in that sense, really empowering to see that they were actually getting something for themselves and could spend something on their own, or not having to give everything away to the families if they didn't want to, and so on. So I think that is also one of the
Is
great
that
things
is
about
that
it.
you in the shot?
Yeah, it's me and one of the
Oh,
employees there. Yeah,
lovely.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you find, sorry, going off piece again a bit, do you find that, like me, being a person of color is really exciting and interesting working in this area of sustainability?
Well, yeah, I guess so. I have the benefit of looking Indian when I'm in India, but I'm not actually. I'm was born in Sri Lanka, and I'm Swedish. Yeah, I've been here since I was a child. So
Ah,
in
so
one way, I have this opportunity of being both, basically.
yes, 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 absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, so where we are now, maybe that's a little bit dated, but we are still expanding to other, countries, but also other suppliers as well. We're trying to collaborate with other brands where we can. We have set the official goals. Maybe they need to be revised then, as mentioned. We are measuring the progress annually, so that can be followed in our sustainability report. And I would say that the social aspects is a very integrated part of our long-term strategy as well. And we feel that by this program, it's also giving us a really good connection, I would say, with our suppliers. Armstrong is one of them, but I think we can have a quote like this from almost all of them that we have an active program with. So it feels like it's also strengthening the relationship actually that we have. Um,
And do
some
you
of
do you find that when you do face a problem, some kind of unforeseen challenge or crisis, that actually that trust and that strength of partnership makes a difference? I mean, it's difficult obviously to
yeah,
know outcomes, but
yeah, I would say so. I mean, for example, during the COVID years there, I think it was like 2 years actually in India where it was really crucial. Of course, that relationship was strengthened even further. We supported with additional payments and so on, giving maybe some was pure donations as well, but other was more like an advance, for example, in terms of production or fabric purchase or something like that. So also help them with the cash flow and so on during this critical time. So I think in that way we have also shown that we do have a special relationship with the suppliers that we work with, and I think that is a quite high trust among us. Yeah.
And I suppose also Nudie was also doing pretty well over the COVID period in terms of online sales. So you didn't, many retailers just, fell through the floor.
Yeah. But
Those
well, we
restrictions.
were not doing very well. I would not say that because we did suffer also. But we do have a global setup in terms of distribution, so we were able to sort of balance that a bit, both with the online, but also having shops in different parts of the world helped us a little bit in balancing the losses, you can say.
Talented team. So key learning. So working,
Yeah.
prioritizing mature suppliers first. Do you want to go
Yeah.
through that?
So basically, when we started, we thought that maybe we should start where we have the biggest leverage, basically, because then it would be easier to get somewhere. But then we also realized that if the management is not on board, then it's really difficult to get something going. So that's why we started with Armstrong, because we thought that we had already like a quite mature supplier in this topic, and also we had the highest wage gap there in India between the minimum and the living wage. So it was also a very natural way of starting there. But I also think that if any other brand's gonna start somewhere, I don't think that maybe you can just go with the lowest hanging fruit sort of, rather than doing it in the more correct way, maybe with where we have the biggest leverage. If it's not matching, I think that's that is one key learning. Of course, the long-term relationship is really important here. So it's no idea really to start something with a supplier that that you're not gonna put orders to the next year, because then it will all be very not so very committed, I would say.
Yes, the
Yeah,
expectation. It's unfair to raise expectation, isn't it? And then
exactly. Yeah. I think the trust, I've been talking about that a lot, I guess, but the trust to the suppliers, and also having them run the daily like operations and calculations. I think that is really important. I think it's also um, I mean, you don't want to have like situation where the brand is responsible for everything, and then as soon as the brand, for example during COVID, takes on a big loss or something, they're not able to continue that commitment. So I think that is really important also, that it's actually run by the ones that knowing what's going on in the factory. And our responsibility as brands is basically to pay what we should pay for the products that we produce. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons that we have been able to execute this program in several places is the fact that we've been able to work very closely with our buyer and product development team. So normally we travel together. We also have joint discussions with the supplier. So it's not like I come one week and present this new idea, and then they come the next week and place the orders. So we need
that
to do that.
internal
Yeah,
collaboration
exactly.
and shared vision of, and also the execution.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm.
So that is really important. And I think we moved from having living wage, I would say, as like a sustainability topic. I would say today it's run by the product development department, because they are the ones having the costing sheets, and they are the ones like approving in the system, like, okay, we can allow this added cost without impacting the margins too much, and so on. So it's of course a close collaboration, but now I would say that the operational part of our living wage program is more done by the product development department. And in that sense, I would say that it's been a really success, because I think it's the risk of having living wages as a sustainability topic for brands is really riskful, actually, because that could be as soon as I mean, as soon as you need to cut down on something, maybe this will be it then. But if it's integrated into the products like it should be, it's much more difficult to argue for that. So
And it's actually integrated into the process of how
yeah,
you develop the product, isn't it? If it's also part of the costings and
yeah,
the cultural awareness of the product development design team.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Evaluate the system continuously. As I said, we never claim this program to be perfect in any way. So we are seeking feedback both from the workers, the management, and also the NGOs that we've been working with sometimes, and to see where we can improve and where we can adjust and so on. And some of the suggestions that we received over the years has also been implemented. And I think that is a really good way of creating like engagement for everyone involved in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that
Um,
continuous evaluation, is that as a kind of a review process annually or biannually? How does it
well,
work?
I think it has not been regulated like that, very
Mm.
like in a very structured way, maybe. But we normally visit all of our suppliers once a year, for example, and then we take the opportunity to also to have these interviews, as you saw there, with the workers. We talk to the management about the process. We see like, okay, in one of the committees, has the program been discussed and what did they say and what can be improved and so on. So we try to get feedback when we meet suppliers and have the chance to talk to some people as well.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, what else here? I think the local adaptation, as I mentioned before, is really crucial, and I think we have adjusted the program slightly to each and every unit that we've been in. So I think that is positive in that way because we are able to do that. We don't have so many suppliers, so you can get a really like customized way of executing this program. But I also understand the reality and the fact that many brands have so many suppliers, and this is something that you cannot really do in a large scale supply chain. But
But I hear that some brands are also consolidating because there are so many both environmental and social
mm,
innovations that are being required. So as to begin to start to
yeah,
make it
maybe we can see a
manageable.
trend
Yeah,
like that, maybe,
yeah,
but
yeah.
still, I mean, we have, as I said, we had like three suppliers in India, three main suppliers, and that is quite few, I think.
Mm.
So yeah, of course, going from I don't know, 1,000 to 800 might be a good start, but it's still like if you have that amount of suppliers, implementing a living wage at each and every one of them is going to be a really tough journey. Um, but yeah, so maybe there are other ways to, I think, having, for example, this open costing and getting that kind of um, yeah, daily operations handled by the product development and buyer team. I think that could be one way of getting that into the normal processes more and more.
And I suppose if we're managing, thousands, well, hundreds of thousands
Mm,
of SKUs and styles in many respects, then we just need to be able to do what we do with product, the details of product, with the suppliers and the workers, don't
yeah,
we? Yeah.
yeah,
Um, can I just go back to one question I have?
yeah.
So, with this strengthening of work and management dialogue, in my research, one of the problems that I've found is that there's still typically management is male, and there's because of the cultural entrenchment, as it were. There there's a sense of this is women's role. So even whilst there are some initiatives to and certainly sustainably crafted clothing, one of your suppliers, your partners. They were doing some fantastic female leadership training for a couple of days with an external NGO and really building up the confidence of these young women. It was so impressive. Um, but other factories that I visited, that there's very little supervisor training going on. There's certainly no women in middle management nor senior management. Um, how how do you think from your experience and perspective, and maybe this is more of a kind of a personal observation as opposed to brand observation, how do you think that we can move to um, enabling a more female framing or a feminine framing of what's necessary, and this need actually to create more rights and better wages
Mm.
for everyone, and also for a just transition. That we've got
Yeah.
so many poly crises going on at the moment. It feels that we're missing an opportunity to allow women with their lived experience to frame um, what the issues are and the decisions, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's a really good question, of course, and I think for as you mentioned there at SEC, where we had this female supervisor training, I think it has to start in that way. I mean, the like the manager of that factory normally says, like he doesn't want to have tons of audits telling him what to do, reports. The request for what should be done should come from their own employees and their own needs and their own wishes. So I think starting by sort of empowering the women to take on these positions, creating the better work environment for themselves and their colleagues and so on. I think that is like the way forward. Of course, it's going to take a long time, I guess, and it's not going to be easy. But I think it needs to come from within, I guess. That is my belief.
And buyers can do something in holding the space and empowering that
Yeah,
way of
we
thinking and that transition. Because
exactly. So in this case, we facilitated for the training, we paid for the training, but the rest is sort of up to of course the training program, but also to the workers that attending the training. That's to capture um, um,
well, may I say that
different
your money
levels.
was
Yeah.
extremely well spent, because the energy that was in the room was visceral, and the uh, the factory owner and manager, Shrivanga, he also was incredibly supportive in a very, very authentic way of this process and the design of a program that would enable these brilliant women to feel a sense of ownership and career development and professional development. So congratulations, and I really hope that more brands and retailers will start to do what you're doing. You haven't read the last one. I'm so sorry. I keep going off on a tangent, don't I?
Yeah. Well, the last one here was yeah, basically also what I was saying before, that I think the overall goal for us has always been to, yeah, for the workers to receive high wages, so have more money. Not so much interested in like using the perfect method or the wording or so on. So I think that's comes second, I would say. It's always good to have a good method and a good structure of executing and so on. But I think the overall goal here is actually to provide the workers the money that they should have actually for producing our garments.
And can I ask people who are listening to this conversation, what would your first recommendations to a brand or retailer be? Would you recommend that they join the Fair Wear Foundation, or that what would you suggest that they do to
Mm,
start this journey? Because as you said, Nudie is a mid-premium brand. There's lots of brands around, whether the kind of the lower end or the very
mm.
kind of luxury end. But yeah. What would you suggest the three actions that brands or retailers could do in order to start this journey?
I think it comes down to actually, first of all, knowing your product, knowing where it's been produced and by whom. So, like having those three things in place, then you also, and of course, visit the supplier. It's really difficult to do this kind of projects if you're sitting in an office in a city in UK or in Sweden. So you have to go there, you have to visit, you have to make um, get a sense of if this is a possible supplier to work with on this topic, and you cannot do that really by having them coming to visit your office, for example. You need to see the factory, you need to see the workforce and talk to people. So I think that is one of the key things to actually mapping your supply chain, knowing which suppliers are actually sharing the same values that you do, that wants to work on this. If there are other suppliers that are having other brands as well, it might be a great opportunity as well. So then you can connect with other brands as well. But I think it doesn't help really that much to force something onto a supplier. I think they need to be on board, regardless if it's like 3 or 1 brand that is interesting in this topic. So I think that would be my first suggestion, to really know what kind of product you have and knowing the supply chain producing that product, and getting to know the people basically, because it's all about relationships as well.
Thank you. This is a really helpful presentation. And the other suggestions that you would have to brands and retailers to start this important work?
I would say to maybe go with a little bit of a low-hanging fruit. So start somewhere and expand from there. I think that's, I mean, otherwise you get stuck somewhere and you cannot really move forward. So I think that is good to have some successes in the beginning, maybe to like a smaller project, or, you know,
I
and
love it. Healthy kind of pragmatism, and then celebrating the wins
yeah.
as we go.
And actually what we did at the very first, as I mentioned early on there, was that we had like a special campaign, you can say, for Amnesty that they wanted to do. So that was also a limitation in terms, it was not the whole product range that we had there. So that could also be an opportunity to, select one product line, for example, or something like that to start with. I think the third thing is actually to talk to people, because I think that is what gives us energy, basically, to know that these people are so thankful and also so like motivated when they receive our share of living wages. And I think that is that you can see that it really gives an impact. I think that is something that you should try to do early on as well, to connect it in the reality. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I mean, it's been such an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your practice at Nudie Jeans, and your work. And you've been an amazing inspiration, and I'm sure this will inspire many to really do things differently.